All right, so next, how are we going to find our standardized test statistics so we can find our probability? Well, we need to find the z. Again, we're doing proportions, right? Whenever you do proportions, you work with the z. So this is going to measure how far our sample statistic is from what we would expect if the null hypothesis h sub 0 were true. So you're going to remember, when we do these problems, we assume the null is true, and then we measure from there. Now, the first thing I have is the z-score formula in words, because the formula, if you look below, looks a little bit clunky, right? So this is what you're doing. You're finding your standardized test statistic by taking your statistic, which is going to be your p hat value in this case, minus your null value, which is going to be p sub 0, and you're going to divide by the standard deviation of your statistic, which will be the standard deviation form for a proportion using the null value in there. And this is what you're going to use for proportions, this formula right here. Again, it looks scarier than it is. You have a great Desmos graphing calculator. I invite you to use it, and I will show you exactly how to type it in. Okay, so it's awesome. All right, and again, do you have to memorize this? No, write it on a piece of paper right now. Go get a tattoo of it real fast on the back of your palm. Okay, that was a joke. All right, but don't memorize these things. Okay, it's silly. All right, so let's see if we can find our z. Suppose you want to perform a test. Null hypothesis p equals 0.30 versus the alternative hypothesis p is greater than 0.30. An SRS of size 50 from the population of interest yields 19 successes. Calculate the standardized test statistic. Okay, so right here, this is a proportion problem. And because it's a proportion problem, my standardized test statistic is going to be a z value. Okay, so here's the formula to find your z. You need the sample proportion minus the null proportion over, and I'll put this in a big square root, the null proportion times 1 minus the null proportion all over your sample size, and that whole denominator goes in that square root. So up here, what do I know? Well, from here, I get my null value. Your p sub 0 is 0.30. Your p hat is going to come from this statement. You have a sample of size 50. So there's your n. That'll also be your bottom number in your sample proportion. And you had 19 successes. That's your top number. If you divide 19 by 50, you get 0.38. And there's all my numbers. Now I'm ready to find my z. So to find my z, I take my p hat, which is 0.38. I subtract my null, which is 0.30. So at least I'll be positive. And then I take my null value, 0.30, times 1 minus 0.30, all divided by 50. And I put that in a square root. So let me take a picture and let me show you how to appropriately type this in to the Desmos graphing calculator. I think that's the easiest way to do it. I really do. Okay, so let's go. Graphing calculator. All right, blank slate. So the first thing I'll do is I'll put a fraction bar. Okay, let's put our top in. The top's easy. 0.38 minus 0.30. I'll arrow down. Now, I'm going to put a square root. Remember, the square root comes from here. Oh, not there. In the bottom. Square root. And then immediately a fraction. So now that square root is in the entire denominator of this fraction. And we use our null value, 0.30 times 1 minus 0.30, all over 50. And there. It's as simple as that. Just make sure that that square root goes over the entire denominator. Okay? And again, if you didn't follow, just back the video up and watch it again. Your z value is to 3 decimals. So when I write this down, let's see what the third decimal place is. It's a 4. This 4 does nothing to it. So your z value is 1.234. How cute is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Easy peasy. And that's how you do it. So you have plenty of practice at this in your homework. Don't you worry. Okay? It's because it cares so much about you. Last objective's coming.